Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Let's start with what's making news. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized human rights organizations, women's groups, and the United Nations for failing to speak out about the rapes and other atrocities committed by Hamas against Israeli women. US President Joe Biden echoed Netanyahu's sentiments. At a fundraiser, Biden called the reports of sexual violence appalling and urged the world to condemn horrific accounts of unimaginable cruelty. In Washington, the US State Department said it will impose visa bans against individuals involved in undermining peace, security, and stability in the occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin is set to visit Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as Moscow courts allies abroad after being isolated on the Ukraine conflict. The West Asia conflict is likely to be on the agenda. Closer home, India has set up a high-level probe panel after US authorities raised concerns with New Delhi, saying the government had knowledge of a plot to kill the Sikh separatist leader on American soil. But Washington has said it will withhold judgment until India's investigation into allegations of an Indian official's involvement in a conspiracy to assassinate a separatist Sikh leader in the US is completed. Meanwhile, Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu has released a new video in which he said, "We will shake the very foundations of Parliament" on or before 13th December, the anniversary of the 2001 attack. The BJP swept the recent state assembly elections. The party won 3 out of the 4 major states. How did this happen? The Congress held on to its vote shares from the last elections. They were largely the same. But what the BJP did was to substantially increase its own vote share in 3 of these states. It was ahead of the Congress by 4% in Chhattisgarh, by 2% in Rajasthan, and in Madhya Pradesh, the BJP was 8% ahead of the Congress vote share for a record pro-incumbency landslide. Among a significant chunk of these voters were women. How women came to become so crucial to the BJP's calculations is the topic of our discussion today. And joining me are senior journalist Shikha Mukherjee and my colleagues Sudha, Sadhanand and Lakshna Gulati. Shikha, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you.
First off, politics, like so many other arenas in India, is male-dominated. How did Nari Shakti become so important to the BJP in the last couple of years?
Well, I think, there has been a steady increase in women's participation in elections and in decision-making over the last 10, 12, 15, over the last 3 elections. And this election, it's interesting. The Congress has gained women's votes in Rajasthan and in Telangana. And in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, the BJP has gained the women's vote. And most interesting is that in Mizoram, 81% women have voted for the ZPM.
Right.
I think that is remarkable because though the status of women in the Northeast is very different from that of North India or even South India, women's participation in elections in the Northeast has been typically very poor. And this election, the vote share at least indicates that women are making far more conclusive decisions in the elections in the Northeast.
In fact, joining us right now is Shikha. I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Sorry.
Joining me now is Shazia Ilmi, national spokesperson of the BJP. Shazia, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Shazia, how did the women voter become so important to the BJP? Shikha was just telling us how, in the last couple of years, 10, 15 years, women have started stepping out and playing an increasing role in politics and voting. How did the BJP figure this out? Was it 2019? Was it 2014?
I think women have really been the center point of almost all the welfare schemes announced and implemented by Bharatiya Janata Party. And if you look at the numbers, you'll realize that BJP has won actually 50 seats where women voted more than men. Congress bagged about 30. So there is this realization that whether it's, if you look at Awas Yojana and the relationship of a woman with a home, or something like Ujjwala Yojana, which is so important for our women citizens, or it's Mudra Yojana, which is targeting more women than anyone else, or it's working on Izzat Ghar, which are toilets. They are aimed at women and making their lives better. So I think they have been very huge beneficiaries of the government schemes, which have been there by other parties too, and I would not dispute that. But I think they've been implemented with a lot of seriousness, and right at the level of administration, at the state level, but starting from center, they have been taken very, very seriously. And so the actual beneficiaries are women, and I think they have turned out in huge numbers. There are places, in fact, there are so many booths where the women turnout has been much more than that of men. And those are great numbers and very encouraging.
Absolutely.
So yes, our Prime Minister and BJP's manifesto, if you look at it, women are the center point, the focal point, the fulcrum on which the welfareism rests. So you think you educate a woman, you look after a woman, you look after the family, the neighborhood, the town. So it starts with the basic unit, that is the woman, the first and foremost. So it's the last mile connectivity means the last woman down the line. So I think this is the whole idea of Antodaya, and this is a philosophy with which Bharatiya Janata Party works.
In fact, Sudha, I was going to ask you, didn't this start in the South, this focus on the women voters? Wasn't it a Simply South moment there that you had MGR and later Jayalalitha focusing on the women voter to come back to power literally for, election after election?
Sandeep, very interesting what Shazia Ilmi there says, and I think it was in the 90s when Jayalalitha was inducted into the party, and a lot of men, as always, they said that why is she here? She's an actress.
Right.
But MGR decided that she could become the face who could get the women to co-opt with the party very well. And in the 1980s, I think it was in Madurai the first time that he introduced her. Even then there were questions as to why her. But then MGR proved right, because with Jayalalitha the focus on women was very, very strong. And one of the earliest schemes that they introduced was the cradle, the tottil as it's called in Tamil. The cradle scheme, in which, if a lactating mother, food for her, nutrition for her, as well as taking care of the baby. And of course, later it was expanded, it became very expansive. It's about, giving her household utensils and goods, and people laughed and said, listen, why are you giving women mixies and grinders and stuff? But then those women wanted it because their husbands were frittering away all the money in alcohol. Right. They wanted all that so that they could run their kitchens very, very efficiently. And then, of course, there were other schemes as well. So you're right, the South started it.
Right. Shikha, in fact, while Shazia was mentioning this focus on the women voter, it's the core of the BJP manifesto. In fact, a lot of other parties have followed suit with schemes. But the overall representation of women in electoral politics is abysmal. I mean, if you looked at the recent elections, just 10 to 15% of women in all the states. So why this mismatch?
Well, let me go over a little bit of history and a little bit of politics. First and foremost, women's representation in the Lok Sabha is about 10 to 12% on average. And then you have a look at the fact that in the state assemblies, the performance is quite abysmal. Chhattisgarh this time has 21% MLAs who are women, with 19 MLAs. The rest in Madhya Pradesh, it's fluctuated between 30 and 27. In Madhya Pradesh, in Telangana, it has gone up slightly. It's not very good. In Rajasthan as well. Then you look at two other things. One is there was the women's reservation, 1/3 quota for women in Panchayat Raj institutions.
Right.
This was the 73rd and 74th Amendment way back in Narasimha Rao's time. That should have had a positive impact, but it seems to have failed at the level of the State Assembly and, of course, significantly at the state of the Lok Sabha, in other words, the MPs. then you look at the fact that in about 2017, 2018, you get the 50% reservation for women in Panchayati Raj elections. There, again, the impact has been very, very poor, except that more and more women are participating in the elections, but in a lot of places where it's a very dangerous trend, the decision making continues to be made by the men. Right. Therefore, there is much work that needs to be done. And if you look at the way in which political parties, they will pass a bill in the parliament. They will pass a bill in the state assembly saying reservation, we extend the reservation beyond 50%, as some states have done. And then you find that their nomination in the assembly elections or in the MP elections for women is abysmal, absolutely awful. There are one or two exceptions. Trinamool is one of those exceptions where they have gone up to about 40% reservation for women candidates. But that does not mean that the rest of the country is at the same level. And this is a change which needs to be made by the political parties in order to put their party where their votes have gone in passing legislation. This is a completely different thing. And then all the political parties, including the BJP, including the Congress and everybody else, they all come up with the fact that there's a winnability factor, as though women are incapable of winning elections. And I think all this between lip service and actually doing it on the ground, the political establishment has to get cracking. It is not sincere, and because of its insincerity, you find these numbers which we are looking at now. That in Madhya Pradesh, out of 230, there are only 27 MLAs who are women.
I want to bring in Shazia. Shikha, I want to bring in Shazia on this point. Shazia, do you believe that the point that Shikha made, the fact that women candidates aren't chosen because of that winnability factor, and so while political parties might make all these schemes to target the women voter, when it comes to actually handing out tickets, it's always the male candidate that gets the ticket. Do you believe that now, with the Prime Minister making these 4, he said, as far as I'm concerned, there are only 4 castes, right? Women are one of them.
Yes.
And this 33% reservation, do you think things are going to change in the next couple of years, or they're going to be more or less the same?
Well, they had better. I totally agree with what Shikha ji is saying. It's just suited everybody and for too many years. And despite the 33% reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj, the effects have not really been, bottom up. And it's very sad, really. Also, I think a big problem is political parties fielding women from their families, right, essentially, and not really encouraging grassroots karyakartas and women workers from the party. So I think all these bastions need to be challenged. People who don't have political mentors or families, or who are not wives and widows and daughters-in-law of famous political patriarchs, have it very tough.
Yeah.
And there has to be a better way to make sure that there is that kind of mentoring, hand-holding, and training and orientation, mostly, for women to be there. It is a tough world out there, and I agree, it's there everywhere. And yes, when it comes to voters, they'll go for a parliament schemes. So also to show that women are winnable, they have it in them to get the votes and to win, is my call. I am not necessarily fond of, I'm a big fan of the idea of reservations. I mean, right, I think it becomes like but I think sometimes it needs to be done. This kind of an affirmative action to ensure that there are women faces there. But then there's one more thing. Women who are there, women also are a repository of patriarchal power. So, and the mandate for all who are there at the helm of affairs is to ensure that there is equity. So whether it's a man MP or a woman MP, They have to make sure that the commitment remains to equity and equality. And I find a lot of male chief ministers, even like Nitish ji and Naveen Patnaik and a prime minister, who are working steadfastly or for the empowerment of women and ensuring their better place. So one thing is representation of women in the parliament and a better representation at that, and another is actually uplifting the standards, working on delivery and mechanisms which ensures equity for men and women, especially the four castes that Prime Minister spoke about.
Right.
So I think those are very important factors.
Right. I want to bring in my colleague Lakshna. She's done this fine documentary on the BJP's W factor. Lakshna, taking off from what Shazia said, this chupa voter that the women were so far. I mean, have the chupa voters now started speaking up and political parties have been starting to listen to them?
Sir, I'll give you an example right here. You're talking to 4 women. All of us have a very, very decisive voice.
Absolutely.
That's the power of, that's the Indian woman voter that you see today.
Right.
Not chupa anymore.
Okay.
You know, she may have been chupa, she may have been hesitant earlier,
Yeah.
but still cast her vote in the
Right.
way that, you know, she wanted to. But now she's speaking out.
Right.
And that's exactly the way I've begun my story. Because, you know, they are in Rajasthan. What mattered?
Yeah.
Women's safety. In Chhattisgarh, what mattered? Giving women, you know, the kind of money that they wanted. So, you know, just as a direct cash transfer scheme,
Right.
that mattered. In, you know, it's just about tapping into what the women wanted. And now women are with their voice. They're engaging with the political leaders on an equal platform.
Right.
You know, and that's what has changed the game really for political leaders. You know, earlier it used to be like, you know, what is it that women want? Nobody could really figure out what women want. But now women are telling the political leaders, right? We have a voice, listen to us.
Right.
And that's the seismic shift that has happened with, you know, women voters today.
Sudha, do you think this is actually going to translate into more women candidates? Are women going to say, we want women to vote for? We're tired of voting for men.
You know, I do not know. I'm kind of cynical about it, but hope, Lakshna, springs eternal. But one thing is there, and if you remember, in general entertainment channels, they said that if a woman has the remote in her hand,
Right.
then obviously those who have the buying power in the family
Yeah.
tend to buy advertising.
Right.
So if that happens, and if that reflects itself in voting and in franchise, then I guess yes. But I'm still cynical because I agree with both Shikha ji as well as with Shazia that women also happen to be, what Shazia said particularly, that women also happen to be the repository of patriarchal power.
Right.
I think it's going to take a change, but yes, my God, like Lakshna says, we've made a change, and what a change it has been.
Indeed.
We've made a change, and what a change it has been. I'm
Oh,
afraid
yeah.
we're completely out of time there. Thank you very much, Shazia. Thank you, Shikha. Good talking to you, Lakshna and Sudha. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so
thoughts.
much.
And we'll watch that story on News9 Plus, the W factor, the BJP's W factor that's allowed it to power ahead and put it in pole position for 2024.
मेरे लिए महिला सुरक्षा एक अहम मुद्दा है।
नहीं पढ़ी सर, क्या करना चाहिए? वो हर कुछ से अच्छा पढ़ाना चाहिए।
నా భూమి నాకు ప్రాణం, నా భూమి నాకు సొంతం, ఇది నా భూమి ఎవరు తీసుకోవద్దు.
When you don't speak for yourself, others speak for you. Thus, women should be outspoken and loud for what they want.
साइलेंट वोटर अब उनकी गूंज सुनाने लगी है।
माँ अन्नपूर्णा तू ही, माँ अन्नपूर्णा है तू ही बीणा वादनी, हे शक्ति स्वरूपा जगदम्बा, हे नारी तू नारायणी।
When they see their political leaders
raise issues that matter to them. That hits women the most. For women, it matters. Are you going to change your life in this life?
आपने जो प्यार दिया, आशीर्वाद दिया, जो स्नेह दिया, उस आशीर्वाद को मैं बार बार नतमस्तक होकर प्रणाम करता हूँ।
कार ने आपके लिए कुछ किया?
हाँ, यह पैसा तो दिया है।
कितना?
300 दे 300।
किसने दिया है?
300 दे 350 तक का देते?
किसने दिया है?
मोदी।
मेरा नाम मनीषा सिंह है। सुरक्षा मैं मानती हूँ कि बहुत ज़रूरी है महिलाओं के लिए, क्योंकि हमारे बच्चे भी हैं, वो आगे जाके बच्चियाँ भी हैं जो कि कितनी सुरक्षित है उसको लेके कंसर्न करते हैं।
भाजपा का संकल्प है बहनों बेटियों के लिए सुरक्षित माहौल बनाएंगे।
The time of the idea has come. Gender as an important force.
Prime Minister Modi is set to inaugurate the Surat Diamond Bourse on the 17th of December. The Bourse is the world's largest office building. It has over 6 million square feet. It's bigger than the Pentagon. But the inaugural comes at a time when India's diamond trade is in deep distress. 9 out of 10 diamonds worldwide are cut and polished in India. But global uncertainties and the shadow of war have impacted the trade. India's exports of cut and polished diamonds have fallen from $24 billion last year to just $17 billion this year. Our story by Kiran Tare looks at how the diamond trade is losing its sheen. Take a look.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
So two major aspects of why demand for lab growns is growing. One is that they save up your money and they also save up on the planet.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
The war between Russia and Ukraine has hit India's mined diamond industry hard. Russia is the world's largest source of rough mined diamonds. India's Surat processes almost 90% of the world's diamonds. The import of diamonds fell amid the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As a result, India's production was slashed by over 20% in last 1 year. This pushed the mined diamond industry into recession.
In terms of mined diamonds, there are different mines around the world. A few companies own the mines. They give out tenders or they give out diamonds to site holders, which are their long-term partners. The rough diamond comes to India. The planning process is done in India. Then according to the demand and what the yield comes out, they plan the rough diamond. They cut, they polish the diamonds in India. Then it is, again, the polish is either set into jewelry or exported around the world. So that is a supply chain that happens in mined diamonds.
See, India, one of the largest exporter from the far as far as diamonds are concerned. Out of 10 diamonds, 9 diamonds are cut and polished into and exported worldwide. India, as you say, is the base is the cutting and polishing. We have excellent craftsmanship, which over the decades we have skilled workers and everything. Everybody is employed, and currently the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. And basically, that US markets has slowed down because of high inflation, interest costs going up, and that's where the Fed is also trying to control the inflation, and that's the reason the interest rates are rising. That is slowing the demand as far as our category is concerned. As far as US market is concerned, consumers have become a little bit more cautious.
We will restrict trade in Russian diamonds. Russian diamonds are not forever, and we will lay out openly and frankly why these sanctions are necessary and justified.
Antwerp, Belgium, one of the largest diamond trading hubs in the world, has a Russia problem. It was only a few weeks after Russian troops invaded Ukraine last year when diamond firms in Antwerp started getting phone calls from international clients asking them to avoid using stones from Russia.
Diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
China, after pandemic, what exactly the market was expecting, it has not opened up. Even that economy is struggling. So two largest major markets for gems and jewelry is normally slowed down a lot.
One of the big reason has been, I think, pandemic, which created that recessionary trends. And currently, if you see worldwide, fortunately, of course, we as Indians are doing much better than anybody else in the world. And rest of the world is actually going through a recession. The second is, of course, also to do with the Ukraine and Russian war. Because of that, there have been sanctions against the Russian goods. And so that also, what it means is that the Russian supply stops coming. So these are the factories. Now, if during pandemic, for example, even the mines were shut, so there was no rough coming in.
India's exports of cut and polished diamonds have been on the decline since 2021. They are expected to dip further by 15 to 20% by March 2024. The dip in the demand is a global phenomenon. With a share of 65%, De Beers has a monopoly in the global mined diamond supply. In October 2023, owing to global distress in the diamond industry, the company saw a decline of 82% in demand.
We need to understand how we react to the market conditions, market scenario. We need to change as per the change and adapt to new technologies as what exactly we are capable of. Currently, the challenge is on the demand side, and we need to make sure that the supply constraint. We need to make sure that supply doesn't exceed demand.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry. Right, but I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product, but a different rough source.
The fact of the matter is, it's all about demand and supply. Today, there are about the total mining that is done for mined diamonds is about 116 million carats. Okay, so that becomes your rough supply of rough diamonds. The demand for rough diamonds is close to 178 million carats. So there is already a gap of 62 million carats. Now, when you move to 2030, right, in just 7-8 years, the total demand is going to go to 221 million carats, and this production is going to come down to 62 million carats from current 116 million. And why is that going to happen? Is also because, as I initially said, that finally it's a God's gift. So by 2050, the total requirement, is going to go to 298 million carats, and the mining is going to come down to 14 million carats. So there is going to be a huge gap, and when that gap is going to be there, so there is a demand, so there has to be a supply, and I think that's where the lab-grown diamond actually fits in naturally.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, you know, the mining costs, the heavy mining costs that are imposed on the consumers when purchasing natural diamonds, that is entirely saved up here, which is why they're even more affordable. So two major aspects of why demand for lab growns is growing. One is that they save up your money and they also save the planet. They take up a natural diamond, they cut a thin layer of that, and then they place it in the plasma reactor. And then they recreate the environment that the diamond gets below the surface above. So you're actually developing, you know, the same gases are infused, the same temperature pressure is set. Diamond is nothing but made out of carbon. So the carbon starts separating and forming layers on top of this natural diamond seed, and that grows into your rock. This rock is identical to the rocks that come from the mines.
Currently, we are almost at the $2 billion from India. Almost means what our data what we have collected. Almost it is we are exporting almost more than $2 billion. And the way it is going and the way it gradually going to be accepted into the new segment as such, that future looks very bright. It can be easily in a couple of years' time we see a market growing to 5 billion.
When I'm purchasing a diamond, it is not contributing to any kind of necessity. It is just a piece of rock that sits on my body to make me look beautiful and make me more confident. But 1 carat of a natural diamond destroys 250 tons of land. It destroys 500 liters of water. 1 carat of a diamond, right? And today in the world we consume about 116 million carats of diamonds. So we can only imagine the kind of environmental damage and destruction that's associated with mining.
At the moment, lab-grown diamond exports is about $1.7 billion worth. But as I said, it's a baby right now. It's still growing. It's a long way to go. But the potential is it may go right up to $40 billion in the next 7-8 years.
We are sitting on a huge consumption base. Today in India, less than 5% of Indian women actually have been able to afford or wear natural diamonds. You know, we are talking about the balanced 95% and the 5% who also want to upgrade to larger stones. You know, so we have a millennial population of 41 crores. It's larger than the entire population of United States. You know, so we have a huge consumer base here.
It is not a product where people are looking for an investment, but yes, it is currently the product where your desire is going to be fulfilled.
I consider myself to be a dream merchant. How I sell a dream is more important than a product. Because with diamonds especially, there is always an emotional connect. So one needs to build that emotional connect.
The newly built Surat Diamond Bourse will open on December 17th. Spread over 71 lakh square feet, it is the world's largest office. Almost 90% of Mumbai's diamond traders have shifted to Surat. Can this change in location bring a change in their fortunes as well?
Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro has threatened to invade neighboring Guyana. It has to do with the oil-rich province of Essequibo. It's like a replay of Saddam Hussein's invasion of oil-rich Kuwait in 1990. Let's watch Deepak Badana's explainer on why this potential conflict should worry India.
On December 3, 2023, Venezuela conducted a public referendum asking its citizens whether it should annex Essequibo, an oil and mineral-rich region in neighboring Guyana. The results saw 95% of voters favoring the takeover of Essequibo. This referendum, held despite warnings from the International Court of Justice, has heightened concerns for regional stability in Latin America. Today, News9 looks at the long-standing Essequibo dispute and the geopolitical tensions, historical claims, and economic interests that surround it. The competing claims of Venezuela and Guyana over Essequibo date back to Spanish colonial times, when Essequibo was a part of Venezuela. This changed in 1899, when an international tribunal decided on a new boundary between Venezuela and the then British Guyana. Venezuela has never really accepted it. The Latin American nation contested the ruling in the 60s and then in the 80s. The present crisis, however, began in 2015 when ExxonMobil found oil reservoirs about 200 kilometers off the coastline of Guyana. This set off a new round of hostilities. To be clear, Venezuela isn't really in need of Essequibo for its oil. The country already has the largest oil reserves in the world. For the Nicolas Maduro government, the Essequibo issue is one of nationalism. In the days leading up to the vote, massive media campaigns urged people to vote in the referendum as a matter of patriotic duty. Over 10.5 million Venezuelans, or roughly half of the registered voters, participated in the referendum with 95% voting yes. President Maduro described the referendum as a total success and the beginning of a new historic stage. But how Venezuela intends to implement the results still remains unknown. President Mohamed Irfan Ali reassured Guyana citizens that the government is working to ensure the country's borders remain intact. The president also visited troops in the Essequibo region, where he hoisted a Guyanese flag as a symbolic gesture. The rising tensions between Guyana and Venezuela have grave implications for regional stability in Latin America. As of now, the Venezuela military has already established an airstrip near the Venezuela-Guyana border to serve as a logistical support point for the integration of Essequibo. Guyana too has called for military preparedness. Meanwhile, neighboring Brazil has increased military deployment near its northern border for intensified defensive operations. The dispute also has a bearing on India and the larger world. Venezuela was India's fifth largest supplier of oil in 2019, providing close to 16 million tons of crude oil to Indian refiners. Now, as the American sanctions have been lifted, Venezuela has resumed these supplies. Guyana and India are united by historical connections and cultural affinities. Over 40% of Guyana's population is comprised of people of Indian origin, and even the current Guyana president, Mohamed Irfan Ali, traces his ancestry to India. 2023 has seen the inking of an MOU between India and Guyana for cooperation in the oil and gas sector. Guyana has also agreed to the purchase of 2 Dornier 228 aircraft from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So what happens should a conflict break out? Venezuela has been crippled by American sanctions. Its economy is weak and it has few resources for a war. Guyana, however, has no military to speak of, with its armed forces strength at just 5,000 troops. Will the Americans play a role in diffusing the situation? Will this become yet another proxy war like the Russia-Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza conflict? Will the world economy be able to take another hit with oil prices spiraling out of control? Will India remain unaffected by yet another international crisis? We all wait for these answers with bated breath.
Deepak also spoke with Trinidad-based lawyer and defense expert Sanjay Badri Maharaj on the repercussions of the conflict in the region.
Unfortunately, Venezuela, taking a leaf out of China's book, has said that it does not accept the jurisdiction of the ICJ in this matter. If one would recall the South China Sea dispute with the Philippines, that's exactly what the Chinese did to the Philippines. And similarly, Venezuela is counting on the massive economic and military disparity between the two countries to be able to strong-arm Guyana into whatever it wants. Guyana, on the other hand, has resolutely sought the protection of the ICJ correctly and has made an outreach to all its political allies around the world. And the allies, some have been more forthcoming than others, but all have pledged at least a level of political support to Guyana. So you find that countries like, of CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, have given diplomatic support at some level, but not particularly aggressive diplomatic support, but diplomatic support nonetheless. Countries like Brazil, however, have been much more active. The Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force, Brigadier Omar Khan, is up to yesterday was in Brazil, forging links between the Brazilian military and Guyana to the extent that the 1st Jungle Infantry Brigade of the Brazilian Army has moved to the frontier and has close relations with the 1st Battalion of the Guyana Defense Force, the 1st Infantry Battalion, the Guyana Defense Force. So Guyana is going all out to try and bolster its geopolitical alliances and friendships with a view to deterring any Venezuelan thing. Now, Maduro has raked up this issue because he's facing re-election soon.
Did the stock market know of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel? Well, there's a new paper out by a former SEC Commissioner, Robert Jackson, who says that there was massive trading on short selling. There was massive short selling on Israeli stocks on the days preceding the attacks. And joining me to discuss this very interesting paper, Trading on Terror, is Vijay Bhabwani, author and financial expert who follows the Middle East. Mr. Bhabwani, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you for having me on your show, Sandeep.
Break it down for us, Mr. Bhabwani. This paper, it comes from two very renowned experts. One of them is a former SEC commissioner. How possible is it that someone actually knew of the attack on the 7th of October and they massively started shorting Israeli stocks?
Well, out of the two parties, Israel was the one that got attacked and Hamas was the one that was the attacker.
Right.
At least one party, that is Hamas, knew it was going to attack. Could Hamas have initiated shots? Very likely, very possible. Let's not forget that many of these militant/terror organizations are now comprising membership of highly educated, literate members who are well versed with new age technology. Let me also remind you that after 9/11 happened in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States, the FBI, tracked the movements in the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, and they were surprised to find that there were massive short sales initiated on US airlines. Remember, the primary means was airlines. So massive short sales were found in airlines, massive shorts were found in US banks and hospitality sector because people would refuse to move out of their houses. And what you are talking about is a report that there was massive short selling on the MSCI Israel Exchange Traded Fund, the ETF.
Yes.
What I think the ex-SEC chairman also needs to include is there are other ways of making money before a terror event like this. There could be massive long buying in gold because any war or any terror attack like this would immediately result in a spike in gold, which happened. There could also have been a massive long build-up in crude oil because crude oil was running up in those days, and as soon as the news of war came, crude went up a little more. So there are various ways where the people who knew this attack was going to happen could have profited from it, and the report is highlighting just one aspect.
Right. And what is the action that the authorities could take on something like this, on short selling? Like, for instance, what could the US SEC do now? They're obviously investigating this. The paper suggests that.
You see, banning short sales would not be the remedy here. It was tried, mind you, it was tried after 9/11.
Right.
Now, when you ban short sales, you are basically increasing the counterparty risk in the market. Let me explain to you in a layman's language.
Yeah.
You want to buy stocks, you need a seller. So to the buyer who wants to buy, the seller is the counterparty, and to the seller who wants to sell, the buyer is the counterparty. Without a counterparty, the market collapses. So banning short sales is not the idea. It's not the remedy here. What is the remedy here is to basically monitor the color of funds that are coming into the financial market. By funds, I mean slush funds, black money, terror funding, call it what you want. To that extent, we in India are very, very safe because we insist on KYC or know your client.
Yes.
And we follow the FATCA and the Financial Intelligence Unit's directives before admitting foreign money coming into the country. The US will basically need to tighten the norms for any and everybody coming in and playing their stock market. They need to be more rigid and basically more alert about knowing the identity of the traders and participants.
Right. So, Mr. Bhavani, is there any possibility now? The report mentions that these traders were all anonymous. Is there any possibility we could get to know who these traders were who were doing these shorts and possibly investigate that link?
It's been 22 years since 9/11 happened. They still haven't found the perpetrators of those short sales on the US airline and banking stocks. The problem is that you basically allow numbered accounts. By numbered accounts, I mean money that flows out of these accounts into the stock market don't have a real name attached to them. There's just the identification number. You have tax shelters and tax haven countries where client confidentiality agreements are ironclad. So basically all they will find is a number. Right? So knowing the identity of the person will be next to impossible. I think, in my humble opinion, all this has to stop.
Absolutely. All this has to stop, and like you mentioned, the KYC, India's good old KYC is possibly the way out. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhavani. Nice speaking with you.
Thank you.
Before we go, North Korea's Kim Jong-un is the world's only third-generation dictator, and a ruthless one at that. Over the years, he's withstood global sanctions, executed opponents using anti-aircraft guns, and supervised ICBM tests. Simply put, he's a hard nut to crack. But interestingly, North Korean TV channels broadcast visuals of Kim crying recently. It turns out his country's falling birth rates prompted the tears. Now, both the Koreas, North and South, have a population issue. A high cost of living in the prosperous South Korea is forcing people to have fewer babies. The same problem persists in North Korea, despite the fact that it's among the world's poorest countries. It's too costly to have babies in North Korea. We'll leave you with these visuals of Kim's crocodile tears. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a